Cornish Saints and Sinners by J. Henry Harris.
Chapter 10. The Cornish taste has not hitherto rioted in graven images. Ancient monuments were so plentiful that it may have been thought quite unnecessary to add to the number in any shape or form, especially when it was known that the finest monoliths were split up and carted away for gateposts for cattle to rub against, or worse than all, be burnt for lime. However, graven images are rare in the county. A good citizen of Edinburgh or Glasgow would put all the statuary in the county in his back garden. Sir Humphrey Davy stands outside the market at Penzance, and Richard Lander, the plucky African traveller, is skied on a Doric column on the top of a hill in Truro. Foote, the comedian, Polwell, county historian, and Henry Martin, the sainted missionary, over whose barren love story and early death rivers of salt tears have flowed, were all born in Truro. But we didn't see any graven images recording the fact. Guy sought information from an intelligent policeman who said he knew Henry Martin well, and a quiet man he was when sober. There are some capital sites in the city for a few statues to Cornish worthies, and the effigy of the sainted Martin would, at all events, help to preserve his memory from sad imputations. There is a Cornish flavour about the great Earl of Chatham, who should have been born at the family mansion at Bookworm, instead of at Westminster where his mother happened to be, and a Cornish flavour too about the gifted Lady Hester Stanhope, who did not forget to speak well of Cornish miners on account of their race in her Syrian home. Cousin Jack might remember this and shell out liberally if the public fancy runs one day towards statues. The Molesworths have a claim to be set up in marble, and so has Sir Richard Trevithick, the Camborne miner, and so also John Couch Adams, the discoverer of the planet Neptune. These are a few worthies to go on with, and by the time their statues are unveiled some, now living, may be ripe for immortality in stone. The few modern monuments are not remarkable as such. The Gilbert monument at Bodmin outgrew its strength, and is not likely to startle remote posterity as a 19th century antiquity. Once upon a time there was a battle at Stamford Hill, not far from Bude, when Sir Bevil Grenville and his stalwarts gave the Roundheads a fair drubbing. Then a monument was erected to record the historic event, and it tumbled down. Sir Bevil Grenville had a giant servant named Anthony Payne, and the great Kneller painted his portrait, and the canvas has a place of honour in the museum of the Royal Institution. The Bookworm remarked that it was not at all singular that the county had turned out no sculptors, when public bodies did so little to encourage art, and that what they did was done so badly. Truro is not the capital of the county, though many people think it ought to be. It has a cathedral now, which counts for something, and is the home of the classy people, which counts for a great deal when the question is one of capital with a big C. Every few years there is a battle royal over the capital question, and the archaeologists and the antiquarians dust each other with seals and charters, doomsday books and inquisitions, and all the rest of it. The grand tournament is between Bodmin and Launceston, which latter possesses an old castle, or what is left of one, and was anciently the place for the hanging of criminals for capital offences. But as the judges were served with small beer at dinner, and their beds were not properly aired, they moved on to Bodmin, where the beer was stronger and the bed linen better looked after. Besides, The tallow candles gave better light in the Bodmin than in the Launceston lodgings, which was important to judges on circuit when they had to sit up late and read papers and note up evidence badly written with their own hand and bad pens. The Launceston people didn't seem to care much about their privileges at the time of losing them. In fact, they were just then feeling sore at having lost one member of Parliament under the Reform Bill, and the market was flat for honours, which didn't mean cash in hand. Then Bodmin took on the assizes and the hangings and became the capital with a big C, and built a lunatic asylum and a jail up to date. The question now is whether our gracious Lord the King would hold out a little finger to the Mayor of Launceston or to the Mayor of Bodmin as most truly representing the capital of Cornwall. The point has to be settled. Then Truro comes in and laughs at both and, pointing to its cathedral, says, "If you want a capital with a big C, look here," which pleases all the classy people and sets the rest laughing, except the ancient Britons of Penzance, who swagger about climate, also with a big C. As climate and capital both begin with C, it is easy to argue that they are very much alike. Bodmin and Launceston tilt in rusty armour, and Truro and Penzance with bodkins, and no harm is done. The Bookworm made a tour of the libraries and museums, and somewhere met a kindred soul, which so pleased him that he pronounced Truro the literary town in the duchy. Certainly the city has a professional air, which is native. If ever there is a Cornish university, it will come to Truro, if it walk upon crutches to get there. Caps and gowns, taking snuff and looking lexicons coming out of the shadow of Church Lane, would be as natural as life. And then the undergrads swelling Boscawen and Street in term. They are not there just now, but the place looks as though cut out for academic maternity. The professorial air belonged to the place before the cathedral was dreamt of. Perhaps the cathedral came because the place had the right sort of style about it. There is a country look about the shops in Boscawen Street, which is all its own. Some of the shops just put up wire blinds with a legend painted on them, discouraging to the vulgar looking for bargains and misfits. "Nothing of the sort here. Our customers write cheques, you know." There are other shops with discount for cash, writ large all over them, but they seem out of place somehow. There was always this sort of county family style about the town and people, who were always fond of sports and had a cockpit. What strikes the stranger first is the inexhaustible water supply. Miniature canals ripple along on both sides of the streets, clear, bright, fresh water, which would be worth no end of money in a thirsty land. Ripple, ripple, ripple all day long, and all the year through, never overflowing, never drying up. A thing of beauty and a joy forever. Hydrophobia is unknown amongst dogs, and is only observable amongst the higher animals, generally on paydays and holidays. The inhabitants, however, pay water taxes quite cheerfully, and are not extravagant users in their houses. It is a reproach to Londoners, who are so extravagant with water, to see how thrifty the people are. The people of Helston are blessed with water running free in the same way. Cornish people do not live much in towns. They seem to prefer living amongst the rocks and trees, upon the downs, amongst the shadows of they know not what, and sounds which are as echoes from long ago. A very small town elsewhere fills the untravelled with amazement, and stories are told of the cunning which was shown by an old man who carried a piece of chalk in his pocket and placed a mark on the corner of every street he turned, and so made his way plain when he wished to return. But the poor fellow was sadly puzzled when a joker rubbed out his marks and put facsimiles in wrong places. But, in truth, Cornish towns are not very puzzling to an ordinary pavement trotter, and the houses are not much to look at. Solid walls, pierced with holes and covered by a roof, is a house. There are whole streets like this in all the towns, and most of the shops have the appearance of being private houses accommodated, in a land where the Phoenician and Greek came and the Roman dwelt, where Spaniard, Frenchman and Fleming settled, leaving their names and blood behind. One might expect to find specimens of the architecture of many periods and countries. But it is no use looking for what does not exist. The Cornish never seem to have invited the envy and hatred of others by the outward beauty of their dwellings. The Fore Street of a town, however ancient and celebrated for riches and commerce, never gives one the idea that merchant princes dwelt here, and loved to dwell in earthly tabernacles with polished beams and hanging galleries and oriel windows painted, decorated, and varnished, as we see in many a high street, in many a town in the rest of England. The Cornish genius had no great turn for architecture. Its municipal buildings are plain and thrifty, like the dwelling houses. To be wind and watertight is the native idea of comfort, and then plenty of whitewash and a little paint. There must have been native artists in abundance during the centuries, but they were seldom employed with chisel and brush in decorating private dwellings or corporation buildings. The county turned out one little painter who mixed his colours with brains, and so became the rage for a London season. But when there is a bit to be found anywhere, it is generally in or about a church, and stranger fingers executed it. On the moors and on the coast, the idea of a dwelling is that of a stone hut with window and chimney, not so very much in advance of the dwellings of the Paleolithic age, which shows how slow the evolution of one idea may be, whilst others are travelling at motor pace. Where stone abounds, the dwelling is a cave above the ground. Where stone is scarce, the yellow earth is mixed with a little chopped straw, and makes the wall as much like the neighbouring soil as peas in a pod. This is cob wall, and when covered with thatch and half hidden with flowering creepers, cob wall cottages are pleasant to look at. Specimens of stone dwellings with thatched roofs abound in the Lizard district, and cob wall cottages, more or less in ruins, are almost everywhere. Men and women are in the habit of leaving their boots and clogs outside their dwellings. And when the doors are open, there is a great display of old crockery and china ornaments in stiff-looking cupboards with glass doors. Very like a painting by a Dutch artist is the interior of a Cornish cottage on a moor. Old fishing towns, which have not yet been too much improved, show the practical side of the Cornishman's mind in the matter of dwellings. The idea of a street never occurred to him. What he wanted was a place on shore in which to store his nets and fishing gear, sails and spars, and over that a loft, which he divided into rooms fitted up with lockers, like the cuddy of his boat or the cabin of a ship, and that was his castle. He reached the ground by means of stone or wooden steps, having the appearance on land of steps let down from the gangway of a ship. In fact, the idea of a dwelling was that of a ship in stone, and the similarity was the greater when a hatch was lifted up in the kitchen and descent made into the cellar below, just as one would descend into the hold of a ship through the open hatchway. The Cornish fisher's idea of comfort was snugness. His dwelling overlooked the harbour, and he could see his boat lying in her moorings, and open his window and talk to the men as they passed, and consult the sky and clouds. He could do a lot from his window, his chin resting on his arms, with the least possible trouble to himself. When a fisher cannot live so as to see the harbour from his window, he lives as near the harbour as he can, so as to be out of his boat and into his bed in the shortest time. He detests walking one step further than he can help after he lands. So the idea of regular streets never dawned upon the original builders of New Lynn and St. Ives, Polperro and Low, Foy and Mevagissey. A street is an accident, unless it is modern, the ancient builders of the old towns deeming it sufficient to leave a gangway between the houses, as at Polperro, where a man with broad shoulders can block up the whole thoroughfare. In the villages and coves at the Lizard and Land's End, the fishers' dwellings have a physiognomy in common, and tell of struggle and endurance. And in favoured places, jasmine and myrtle, fuchsia, geranium, and roses step in and cover all the weather-beaten stone, and shabby lintels with glory and perfume. Chapter 11. St. Ives is a small town for its age, but is growing now. The town divides itself into two parts, the new and the old. The new is new, and the old is fragrant. The history of St. Ives also divides itself into two, the ancient and the modern, and the ancient goes back to the time of the saints. It was a woman who founded St. Ives. It is well to keep this in mind, because the well-known St. Ives was a lawyer, and so honest that he was never once struck off the rolls. Some of the piety of the ancient lady is said to linger about the town. It was she who introduced a new breed of cats, and the old town is still famous for cats. There are Manx cats and Persian cats and St. Ives cats. The St. Ives cat is at home in the streets, and may be found in corners or on doorsteps, or stretched at full length across the roads and sidewalks when there are any. St. Ives is apparently owned by cats, so respectful are the inhabitants, and so careful not to tread on their tails or toes. If a cat is stretched out enjoying the sunshine, a man will drive his cart around it, to the danger of humans paying rates and taxes. The St. Ives cat has a well-to-do, lascivious-looking air, and is only properly awake at nights. In the daytime, the animal slinks along courts and side streets, and rubs itself against water-butts and tar-barrels and fish flaskets, until it has an odour of mixed scents, as strong as a distillery of perfumes. Nothing can beat pilchard oil mixed with garbage, which the St. Ives cat loves. When the boats return in early hours of the morning, the cats make tracks for the quay, and every cat knows its own boat, and waits for the men to come ashore, and then purrs and rubs its scented fur against the men's long boots. The men belong to the cats. Every cat a man, and every man a cat. Women and mice don't count much with St. Ives cats. It's men and fish for them. Smiler's pious cat. Daddy, ever hear the story of the Smiler's cat? No? Well then, I'll tell ye, said a man gutting a fish upon an iron post, and throwing tidbits to a long lanky tabby with one mild blue eye, and one a dark grassy green. He wasn't a fighter, except he was provoked, and then he was game, but he was a most orderly cat and pious. Now you may laugh, but if ever there was a pious cat, 'twas Smiler's. Smiler wasn't pious, but Bob was. Bob was black with a white tie round his neck, so he had a respectable appearance, and was looked up to by all the cats in the parish. Bob knew when Smiler had a good week, and knew where to find him. When he'd had enough and 'twas time to go home, Smiler was a peaceful man at all times, and when he'd had full allowance, and more, he'd sit down and talk over old times, and his father and mother, and begin to cry. Then Bob would rub against his legs and make for the door, and Smiler would follow exactly like a child. Yes, he would. When 'twas dark, Bob would walk backwards, and show Smiler the way by the light of his eyes, starboard and port, port and starboard, till Smiler got home. Smiler was that pious he wouldn't eat no fish on a Sunday, and he was so looked up to by all the cats that not one would run down to the quay on a Saturday or Sunday night. Not sure enough. Not if all the boats came in chock full of fish. No Sunday fish for St. Ives was the motto with Bob, and all the cats followed. Smiler was that happy on Saturdays that he couldn't rise on Sundays, and Bob used to keep watch and listen to the Salvation Army services, which he could hear quite plain through the open window. Bob got to like the music and grew serious, and took to following the band. People took notice and said 'twas Smiler's Bob, and expected to see Smiler follow the cat, as he did at nights when he was well boused. Bob was going after Smiler one night as usual, after sharing, and as ill fortune would have it, he met an old friend in the cat line, and they went off together, which was sad for Smiler, who went wrong and slipped into the water without being seen or heard. Bob went about like a mazed cat, and never rested till he sniffed out Smiler, caught by a mooring chain. It was wonderful to see Bob following at the funeral, and many would have taken care of him, but he had a call, and followed the Salvation Army, and to the last day of his innocent life would eat no fish on a Sunday, not no fish even caught on a Saturday. No risks for Bob. If some people was only as good as some cats, said the man, resuming work and throwing a morsel to the long lanky tabby, why then I say there'd be no call for bad blood between East and West on the score of Sunday fishing and Sunday markets. How do you account for this uncommon piety in a cat? Asked Guy. 'Twas bred in him, s'pose. Anyhow, he was uncommon pious, and his good example is followed. Ficey fear cat would no more ate fish catched on Sunday than he'd fly. Would he, Tom? Tom purred. I knowed it, said the man, washing the fish and pushing his forefinger through its gills. The St. Ives women always enjoyed the reputation of being well endowed with tongue. Some people think their old vivacity is the result of foreign blood, but it is singular that the gift of tongue should follow only in the female line. A St. Ives man is quiet enough until his blood is up, and then he wants to hit something or throw something overboard and make a big noise in the open air. There is the story of 3 young women slipping into their pattens and going to the well with their pitchers for water. Their husbands were at sea. The young women began to talk, and they talked on and on until their husbands returned, and found them just at the beginning of an argument. So they off to sea once more, and back again, and the 3 women were still at the well and getting interested in the argument. Then the 3 men took a long voyage, and returning with well-lined purses, found their wives, now grown white, still at the well, but on the point of adjourning till the morrow to take up the thread of the old argument. The St. Ives woman, however, has a turn for business. What her man catches, she sells, and pays his bills for nets and barking and repairs. On land, she's boss, and has a sharing cake once a week when she settles accounts. The sharing cake is an ancient institution and must be respected. It has its ceremonial too, and must be broken with the fingers, not cut with a knife, because cold steel would bring bad luck. The customs of women are very different in the north and south. Like Newlyn, St. Ives is the home of artists of world-wide reputation. Chapter 12. Cornish Sunday to a man of cities is a weariness to the flesh, and a temptation to pray for Monday to come quickly, but for the natives it is a blessed day. A day of feathers and soft down, a day of chewing the cud and being lazy without reproach. The fishermen rarely fish on Saturdays, because the sacred idleness of the Sunday may be broken by the salesmen and railway porters, so the day of rest is made to stretch over as much of 2 days as is worth the having. Farmers are not so well off as fishers, but do what they can in the resting line, and that is something. When we walked through any of the villages on a Sunday, we found the people mostly looking over their garden gates, casting glances up along, or down along, or athwart, just to see what was going on and who was moving. They don't like cycles or cyclists on Sundays, and when one comes along, all the men in their shirt sleeves and all the women helping them to do nothing squirm as though wounded in a tender place. Every time it is the same inward shrinking from activity on a day of rest. Those who do nothing all the week feel just the same, and lie about and squat about indoors when not outside, resting their ample chins upon ample arms, upon gates and walls, staring up along and down along and athwart, watching one another. Whatever can sleep, sleeps, and the people don't seem properly awake until after tea, when the women make ready for chapel and the men go after them. The men wouldn't stir but for the women, and the women make a bee-line for chapel. Sunday is given up to preaching and preachers. If you see a man driving on a Sunday, you may put him down for a local brother who works at his trade all the week and is preacher on Sundays. You may know him by a certain smile of goodness that plays around his mouth, for he is going to have a good time. The lay preacher is a by-product of Methodism, and a valuable one in large and scattered circuits too poor for anything but a little chapel of 4 walls and a brush of whitewash. The Methodist clergy live in the towns and work around the circuit, so the people in the villages see their minister sometimes. The ordained minister is a rounder, because of his travelling round. The lay or local brothers come in and fill up gaps, and they travel from place to place according to a plan, a sort of calendar and timetable combined. It is a system, and it works, and congregations are not wearied with the same face and voice 2 Sundays in succession. It is good for the lay brother who can run one sermon for 3 months without much fear of being bowled out. The lay preacher is almost a professional once a week, and goes so far as to wear a clerical bowler. The white necktie is reserved, as a rule, for his betters. There is no written law upon the subject, but it is understood that the white necktie is for the professional rounder. The lay brother has privileges and may drive proudly through the land of saints on Sundays and be welcomed, though no one else may let or hire a trap for love or money. The lay brother may not ride a bicycle, which is a pity, looked at from the side of horseflesh. "I'll drive 'ee to Plaisey, but I'd rather not," said a good-tempered landlord one Sunday when we wished to pay respects to an ancient monument. "Why would you rather not?" "People talk so, and say nasty things to the children." "But someone has just driven past, and everyone smiled and howdy-dooed him. That's all right, he's going to preach." "But the pony looked tired." "I should say so, 6 mile and stiffish hills, and not once did he get out of the trap." "Do you mean that a preacher of the gospel overdrives his horse?" "I mean that if a hill is stiff as a house, or a preacher won't never walk on a Sunday, not 1 inch of the way." Now the vent peg was out, Our host's eloquence ran freely, and much he said of the overdriving and underfeeding of hired horses by lay preachers on Sundays, and of the reluctance which people had to take on the horse hire contracts for the Sunday work, because the men who walked the hills fast enough in their weekday clothes would not walk an inch in their Sunday clothes when planned for preaching. A false standard of dignity this, which made men cruel. And then the underfeeding, there is no excuse for this. The lay brother is served with all the luxuries of the season at the tables of the brethren, on whom he billeted as a soldier of the cross, and should not forget the hard-working little animal which has dragged him the whole distance, and will have to drag him back again. And the worse the weather, the quicker the pace. Lay preaching is the homely fare of Sunday congregations, who thrive on it because it suits them and sticks in their memories. The higher criticism is not wanted by them. Here are a few specimens picked up in various places. You'll never want friends whilst you've God and your victuals. Some people's religion is like badly baked dough, put in with the bread and took out with the cakes. What the Bible says is true as I've got speckety stockings on. I do pity the poor old devil. He lost such a good place, old Drew catching a cold in his faith. Yes, my dears, he was like some folks along with we, who get boiling hot when they've converted, and then catch chill, Drew sitting on a draught. There was once a great man who gave a great supper to a brave lot of guests, and they didn't come. Not for sure, but they all sent excuses. One said, I've bought a piece of land and must go and try it. And another said, I've bought 5 yoke of oxen and must try they. And another said, I've married a wife and must stop home to try she. Cast you bread upon the waters, and don't ye look first to see which way the wind is blowing. Oh, me dears, there's many a man won't trust the Lord with a penny loaf, so they lose the blessing like old Timothy Tack, who spent 6pence to find 3pence. Love your neighbour, that is a commandment, but if he believe in him, he's sure to do he. Some people say you can't believe a thing unless you can see and feel it, but I say you can. Look-ye now, here's my hand, 4 fingers and a thumb. Well, that's fact, innit? Now then, hiding his hand from view, my hand has got 4 fingers and a thumb, but you can't see 'em. Well, that's belief. Never say then you can't believe what you can't see and feel. When I was a boy, a man used to come round crying bellows to mend, and the schoolmaster, our way, put up a sign, manners to mend. Now I think we might put up that sign in chapels where people come on Sundays traipsing in as though they were going by train, and gutting down and spitting on the floor, for all the world 'twas a tiddlywink. Them's manners to mend, sure enough, and would be the better for mending, like Jakey Looney's breeches ragged behind. Sometimes the local brother's homily is very pointed, but no offence is taken. The preacher is one of themselves, and they will take a lot from him in good part. If a stranger were to take the same liberty, there would be trouble. Here is a specimen from an address spoken from the pulpit in the free and easy manner of everyday conversation. You ain't get into heaven just because you've a pious mother or a pious father, not for sure. Now, I'll tell you a story about a man who deceived most everybody when he was in the flesh, and he liked chatting so much that he prayed loudest after he took in somebody. And there's more like him down along with we now. We'll just give him a name and call him Jim Tresidder. He was on the plan like me, and people said 'twas good to hear him hold forth. And I suppose 'twas. Jim put a bold face upon it when he marched up to the Golden Gate, and rapped with his knuckles upon the little shutter, till Peter looked out. Who are he? Asked Peter. Don't he know me? Why, I'm Jim Tresidder. Then he tuned it up a bit and began to sing, Heaven is my home. Now, Peter must have liked the look of Jim, He had such a pious look with un, for he stretched forth his hand for the key hanging over his head to open the gate with. I'm all right now, thinks Jim, singing louder and louder. Avore I let 'ee in, said Peter, I'll have a look at the book. And he turned over the leaves till he came to the T's. You'm Jim Tresidder of Trevalsa, says he. Yes, says Jim. Then I'm sorry for ye, says Peter, hanging up the keys once more. Then he showed Jim the book through the peephole, and when he seed all the people he'd cheated and the evil he had caused, his heart sank into his shoes. I'll live in a dark corner anywhere if you'll only let me in. My poor mother is waiting for me. She's called Jane and was pious. Now do ye let me in. There's a dear man, says he, the great tears rolling down his cheeks. Your mother is here with the shining ones, says Peter. But you can't come in because of she. No, fie, you can't, for up here every fish do hang by his own gills, and you will hang too, on the outside. The county is honeycombed with dissent, and the fat of the land is labelled Wesleyan. The beneficed clergy are beautifully housed, with gardens and stables and all the appointments of gentlemen. But the livings are not fat. Some country clergy take paying guests, and some let their houses in the summer. The orthodox Wesleyan ministers are fairly well off and live rent-free, and the others live as best they can and get commissions on the sale of books and periodicals. One of the brethren left a record of 30,000 teeth drawn during his professional career. As a rule, they draw well and will draw coin from the most unlikely places. A child having swallowed a piece of silver, the doctor in despair sent for the minister, saying the case was hopeless if he failed to get it. The coin was recovered. There is a good deal of religion to be met with, and not so much need for Salvation Army music as in some places. There are certain times when people want to feel good, but they don't all feel the same way at the same time, which saves monotony. They say that at St. Agnes the people start being good when the cold weather sets in, and the feeling lasts until potato planting time, and then somehow the good feeling sloughs off. I don't know what becomes of it, only it is put on one side for the next season, just like a boy puts on one side his bag of marbles and brings out tops. It's the same boy, but a new game. In the summer, it's a struggle to be good anywhere. There's so many fairs and feasts and frolics, and the young men and maidens are so fond of courting on the cliffs and downs. It's the custom of the country and suits well enough, so strangers may turn their heads on one side. It's none of their business. In the autumn, the good feeling comes again and extends along the coast, especially when the fishing is slight. The young men get tired of the maidens about this time and want to be good for evermore. And the want grows with the badness of the season. One sign of goodness in the country is thrift. The man who neither chews nor smokes nor drinks beer, and who never spends a copper without looking on both sides of it, is sure to be good. You always know when the good season is coming on by the people singing. They are pretty good, in spots, at singing, but the gift, as they call it, is not universal. A gift is supposed to run in families, and a man with the voice of a crow will insist on singing because his great-grandfather once played the double bass in a church choir. There is a musical zone in the West, and the young women who work in the open air have very sweet voices. These are the ball maidens, and work on the dressing floors of the mines. When the time comes round for them to feel good, they tuney up a bit, and take the young men who work underground along with them to the love feasts and prayer meetings in the little Bethel scattered all about the moors. They call themselves Westlums, when they are not something ending in ists or ite, and are bursting with goodness every Whit Monday just as sure as the day comes round. Why, Whit Monday more than any other day is the year would puzzle anyone who did not know that on a certain day the cuckoo must sing. It's a sort of something which makes the birds sing, and it's a sort of something which makes the Westlams feel good on Whit Monday and draws them with invisible bands towards Gwener Pit. Whit Monday is the anniversary of an occasion when John Wesley, the John Wesley, our John Wesley, preached in the pit. Not the pit as it is, but the pit as it was. John Wesley wouldn't know the pit, or the people who flock there now on Whit Mondays. The old pit was an abandoned mine of no particular shape, but inclined to be round, like a bowl warped in the firing. Then the miners came with pickaxe and shovel and cut terraces against the land, and made the ring quite round, with its terraces rising one above another, until it became a sort of county monument to which the Westlams are drawn in their tens of thousands as to a shrine. John Wesley is a saint in Cornwall, and all those who went before him have to take back seats. And Whit Monday at the pit is now a sort of religious carnival with picnic combined, at which St. John would have shied when in the flesh, like good St. Anthony at a pleasant Sunday afternoon with fiddles and a ballet. When Wesley first came among the people, they had an unpleasant trick of throwing stones and turves at him, and hustling him out of one parish into another, and then out upon the downs where he might live upon frosty turnips when there were no blackberries. Starring in the country was not pleasant at times, and cold, wet, and starving. The little great man often had the appearance of a scarecrow riding upon a tough little nag as starved as himself. But he caught on, and emptied the cockpit and wrestling ring, and provided entertainments wherein were mighty wrestlings with the invisible for immortal stakes. So he reached the natural cravings of a dramatic people for excitement and scenic change, and made them actors, with the blue heavens above, the earth trembling, and the hillsides lined with living faces, wet and radiant. Greater than he have tramped the county since, but conditions have altered, and only one Wesley is possible. And that is why people are drawn as to a shrine to Gwener Pit, and the feeling comes upon them every Whit Monday that they must go there. For there is troubling of the waters then, and they may be healed. The old spirit of votive offerings survives in the land of saints and holy wells. The Cornish must have been a very well-meaning folk at one time, estimated by the number of churches which they built. They built little else, perhaps, but they did build good and substantial churches, mostly with square towers and 4 pinnacles, to be seen of men far and near. In the parish of Paul, near Penzance, the towers of 15 parish churches may be counted from one spot, and, though not so thick everywhere, the minds of the people centred around the churches for more reasons than one. In the old days, when roads were few and detestably bad, people reckoned church towers as guides, and calculated distances from church tower to church tower. Every man who ventured far from home knew the church towers by sight and the bells by sound. They were marks at sea as well, and mariners knew them and their bells as well as now they know bellbuoys and lighthouses upon the charts. A hamlet with a church became a town. So a man says he's going to Church Town, and still measures the distance between places by saying it is so far from one church tower to the other. Then came the little chapel, 4 square and whitewashed, with plain glass windows winking and blinking in the daytime. It's a place of joy. Some people measured distances as from Bethel to Zion, and then no other question is needed on the point of worship. It's all there, when the chapel comes before the church. The day of bitterness is passing, but the preference comes out accidentally. Now, there is a third building seen from far and seen everywhere, and that is the school which has been raised by the people with more hardship and self-denial than in the rest of the kingdom, because of the smallness of means, which often makes the dividing line with downright poverty very fine indeed. Only the thrift of the people would have enabled them to uprear schools finer in every respect than chapels, and first and foremost amongst the buildings of the county. The schools rank next the churches, and are usually built where they may be seen. The parsons had to fight tooth and nail for their tithes of cows and calves and pigs and other things, and had to look sharp that butter and cheese were not palmed off on them as of like value. The vicar of Zennor made a note in the parish register that 3 of his tithe-paying parishioners had planted butter and cheese in the chancel of the church, where he let it stay until it became too ripe for endurance, and then he ordered the churchwardens to remove it, which they did, and the 3 smart farmers lost their produce, and the vicar got his tithe of living animals after all. A vicar wanted knowledge not included in university curricula to make the 2 ends meet in a Cornish parish in the good old times. They have to struggle now to hold their own and make a bit, which some say they are doing, and some shake their heads, so one may think what he likes.